Good morning, Icon. Now listen, I realize things look a little different. We're trying out something new. No, we didn't get a new house. This is actually a green screen behind me. We were like, hey, so, our dogs are super distracting every week, and sometimes it kind of feels a little weird being like, welcome to our bedroom. So we thought we'd try out a little something new. So yeah, this is, kind of our current setup here. So welcome. I'm so glad that all of you are here today. Hopefully everyone is trying to stay awake. The spring forward time change is from the devil, in my opinion. I hate it. But I'm here, I'm awake, and I'm excited to be with all of you this morning. Please go ahead and feel free to let us know how you're doing in the chat. So welcome. Just a couple of things to go over with all of you today before we move into worship and our message for today. And the first thing is, here at Icon, we are really passionate about connection, and we really believe in the power of it and believe that it's important. And so one thing that we like to do is be able to stay connected with all of you and to keep you up to date on the things that we have going on around here, any important updates or news that we have to share. And so if you have not yet filled out a Connect card, you can go ahead and click on the Connect button. Oh, hold on a minute. Never mind. When I hit those, apparently the green screen just shows up behind me. So we're just going to avoid the titles for right now. I'm like... it's whatever. Sabrina Unlock said, love
I can fix that later.
Said, love the cruise ship.
We can get fancy with those backgrounds, don't you worry.
Where was I? We were talking about connection. Anyway, if you have not filled out a Connect card, go ahead and click on the Connect button in the chat, and it will take you to a window where you can fill out your information, just so that we're not going to spam you and drive you crazy, but it'll just give you a way to be able to stay connected with us. And then the next thing is, one thing that we really miss about gathering in person is being able to, in person, be able to pray with one another. But just because we're not in person doesn't mean we still can't, agree with one another for the things that we're facing and for encouragement and support. And so if you could use some prayer this morning, go ahead and click on the prayer button, and it will take you to a separate window where one of our hosts can meet with you in that window and hear your requests and be able to agree with you in prayer. And then lastly, just like I say every week, I cannot thank all of you enough for your generosity and continuing to give to Icon. We wouldn't be able to exist without you and without your generosity. So thank you so much for continuing to give. And also, one thing we used to do when we were in person was we did what we called a reverse offering, where we always said, if you have a need, when the buckets went up and down the rows, to take out loose cash to meet those needs. And obviously, we can't do that right now in our current context. So if you do have a need, if you're struggling to pay a bill or buy groceries or any of those things, please reach out to us via email and let us know, because we would love to be able to partner with you in whatever way we can to help take care of some of those needs for you. So we are now going to go into a time of worship with the amazing Arlene. And then after that, we'll come back here for a live message. So in whatever way feels comfortable for you, just use this time as a time to kind of reconnect with God, to kind of center yourself, and to just to breathe a little bit, to be encouraged and supported this morning. And we'll see you right back here in just a little bit.
You're called out into darkness. You reached out to save us. You conquered the grave. You crossed the divide. Lost in our sin, you made us alive. How can we ever hold it inside? We can't You conquered the grave, you crossed the divide. Lost in our sin, you made us alive. How can we ever hold it inside? We can't hold back. We're gonna lift you higher, higher. Hearts burning bright like a fire, fire. Voices unite, make it louder, louder. We're never gonna stop singing. No, we're never gonna stop. Higher, higher, higher. take me a little deeper. I wanna know your heart. I wanna know your heart. 'Cause your love is so much stronger than anything I faced, and I wanna know your heart. I wanna know your heart. Oh, I wanna know your heart. I wanna know your heart.
Yes.
Well, welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that time of worship. Okay, so for today, I'm really excited about this new series that we are starting today. And I'm still trying to get used to this background too, so hopefully I cannot be too terribly distracted. Also, you should know that our dog is terrified of everything, so he's like super scared of the green screen. So he's currently underneath the desk that all of this is sitting on because he can't stray too far because everything is really scary. So anyways, we are starting a series today called Red Letter Gospel, and it's where we're going to be diving into the teachings of Jesus, because in a lot of our Bibles, the words that Jesus spoke are written in red, and hence the name Red Letter Gospel. And, you know, I think throughout all of the ways in which my faith has shifted and changed and evolved in times of doubt and all of that, the one thing for me that has really remained steady and constant is Jesus. And there's just something so compelling about Jesus and the teachings and the way in which he lived and the kind of world that he was showing people that we could partner with God in creating. It's just so incredible to me. And I love diving further into the things that Jesus taught us. And so we're going to be, you know, looking at the Gospels, because that's the books of the Bible where records Jesus's life and teachings. And here's the thing: if you're familiar at all with reading the Scriptures and with reading Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and the words and teachings of Jesus, you know, there are some of Jesus's teachings that we read and they appear to be pretty straightforward. You know, seems to be pretty obvious what he's talking about. It's not that difficult to understand. And then there are other teachings of Jesus that kind of make you go, well, I kind of think I know what he's getting at, but it doesn't fully make sense. And then there's some things where you read it and you're just like, Jesus, what in the heck are you talking about? And so we wanted to take some of these teachings of Jesus and really dive into them a little bit further and maybe explore some things that maybe we haven't ever learned before. Often, you know, when we read our Bibles, we have to remember that our Bibles are translated into English, first of all. What we are reading is not the original languages that the Scriptures were written in. And because we live in a different time and a different culture, we are bringing that lens with us when we read the Scripture. And it's easy for us to actually miss the intended point of Jesus's teachings, because when we don't fully grasp the context from which Jesus was speaking, it's easy for us to miss some things. And I will often hear people say about the Bible, about lots of different things in the Bible, they'll say, well, the Bible is clear on, you know, X, Y, or Z. And a lot of times I'll hear that and I'll go, but is it though? Is it really clear? Because so much of the time it isn't. And a lot of the time it can appear to be clear to us, but it's because we're reading it from our lens and we're not remembering that the Bible, and not even just the Bible as a whole, but like each individual part of the Bible, each book, you know, they were letters and poems, and they were written in a particular time, in a particular culture, to a particular group of people. And so these things matter when we are interpreting the text. And we're all interpreting when we read the Scriptures. We're all doing that because we weren't there. We don't speak those languages. You know, we're all doing our best with an ancient text to try to figure out what the heck this is saying to us. And so in order for us to do that, to interpret the text faithfully, as faithfully as we can. And in order for us to actually fully understand the things that Jesus was trying to say to us, we have to take those things along with us when reading it. We have to remember the context. We have to remember the culture and the people and the day in which it was written and who it was being written to. We have to bring those things with us when reading the text. And even in doing so, we're not going to have it fully figured out every time. And I don't think that that's actually the point anyway. The point is to do what we can with what we know and to do our best to use the scriptures to help point us to the way of Jesus, which is the way of love. So, over the past several years, I've shifted a lot in the ways in which I approach the scriptures and view the scriptures. But one thing that's been really helpful over time is learning to really dig into the cultural context of the text. Now, I am not a theologian or a Bible scholar by any stretch of the imagination, so I'm super sorry to disappoint you if that's what you're expecting this morning. There's so much I don't know about the Bible, so much. And there's so much that I thought I knew that now I'm going, I think I might have been wrong on this. But one thing that I have found is that learning more about first century culture when reading the New Testament and understanding more about the context in which the writings of the New Testament were written, particularly for this series, because we're focusing on the Gospels, which are in the New Testament, that has made the Bible come alive for me in ways that it never has before. And so what I want to do today is I want to take a passage that we are probably all familiar with in one way or another, but I want to provide some cultural context that honestly, when I heard this, it completely changed what I always thought this passage meant. And again, I am not a Bible scholar, so I rely heavily upon the work of people who are much smarter than me when I study and read the scriptures. And so today's message is actually completely inspired by and taken from a podcast, one of Rob Bell's podcast episodes. He is one of my favorite Bible teachers, and he did an episode on this particular teaching of Jesus. And the first time I listened to it, it blew my mind. I was listening and it was like I just couldn't get enough of it. And so I listened to it over and over and over again because it was like all these light bulbs just started going off in my brain. And I was like, oh, that's what this means. And it just completely revolutionized the way that I view this passage. And so today we are going to look at a passage in the book of Matthew, chapter 5, verses 38 through 41. And Matthew chapter 5 is all part of what's considered to be the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus gives. It's this long sermon where he's talking about all different kinds of things about the kingdom of heaven. And so in this passage, this is what it says. It says, "You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, hand over your cloak as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles." Now, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this and have heard this taught. If you've been around church for a while, I'm sure you've heard this taught. I'm sure you've heard the phrase "turn the other cheek," used over and over and over again. And now the way that I have always heard this taught kind of goes something like this. So it's like, okay, if I want to be a good Christian, then when someone hurts me, that I'm supposed to take it and not fight back. Okay, I'm supposed to turn the other cheek and just take it and not retaliate. Okay. Also, I think, I would hear this passage and think I need to be willing to give the clothes off of my back to someone, even if they aren't being caring or loving towards me. I need to be willing to give whatever I have, to people. Or, I need to be willing to always go the extra mile. We look at this hot phrase, going the extra mile, as being about going above and beyond what's asked, right? Someone asks us to do something, we should do even more and go the extra mile. This is kind of how I've always pictured the interpretation of this scripture to be. And it's kind of, you can kind of look at that and go, well, I mean, I guess, like, yeah, like, retaliating against someone who hurt me isn't really the right way to go, but, like, but really, Jesus, like, I'm supposed to, like, when someone hurts me, like, hits me, I'm supposed to, like, turn and let them hit me again? Like, I'm supposed to just let people do that? Like, really? And so there, there's just parts of it that have just always been a little bit confusing. And unfortunately, this interpretation and reading of the text has also been the cause for a lot of harm for people. It's been used to justify abuse and ill treatment. It's been used to guilt people into working themselves to death because we're supposed to always go the extra mile, right? So, it's been used to make people feel like they aren't allowed to set boundaries or to stand up for themselves. And as I listened to this podcast and started to understand what Jesus actually meant, I realized that none of these things are what Jesus is actually asking of us or talking about in this text. Which, when you really think about it, how would any of those things really be what a good and loving God would require of us? Would a good and loving God really require us to, like, continue staying in harmful situations or to continue to allow people to hurt us? So what I want to do is let's take a deeper look at the cultural context of what's happening in that day, and we will find something really different than what we've always believed about this passage. So, okay. So in the first century, it's important to understand that hands had some meaning behind them. So there, the right hand and the left hand had very specific meanings. So you'll see a lot of times in Scripture where we'll talk about, God upholding you with His right hand, things of that nature. So the right hand kind of symbolized power and domination, and the left hand was actually used for like personal grooming. So, you can imagine what all that entails in the first century. And so you wouldn't touch people with your left hand. You would only touch people with your right. And so it's also important to understand that in this time, society was extremely hierarchical. I mean, it was like everyone knew the order of the hierarchy and everyone knew their place in society. Okay, that was very clear to everyone. So here we have Jesus, and He says, okay, if someone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek. Okay, so it's also important to understand that in the first century, given what we just talked about hands, there were two ways to hit someone in the first century. A punch, like making a fist and punching someone, is how you would strike someone who is considered an equal. A slap with the back of the hand was how you would hit someone who was beneath you in the hierarchy. And remember, you didn't touch people with your left hand. So if you were going to strike someone or hit someone, it would always be with your right hand. So I'm going to actually have Dan come into the picture because I want to kind of like illustrate something for you. So
try to get in the shot.
So Dan's welcome back.
Guess who's back? Back again.
Okay. So I'm gonna scoot over a little.
All right.
Okay. So we're gonna I'm not really gonna hit him, so don't worry.
You're hitting me?
Well, I mean,
Okay.
you'll be fine. I promise. Okay, so remember, if you're going to strike someone, it's going to be with your right hand. Okay, so Jesus says, if someone slaps you on the right cheek, so this is Dan's right cheek, okay? So if he's considered beneath me, that's where a slap would take place. If I'm going to slap him with my right hand with the back of my hand, and I slap him like this, well, then Jesus says, to turn the other cheek. So if that person then turns the other cheek, if I'm going to hit him again, I can't use the same motion to slap him on this side of the face with the back of my right hand. Because remember, I'm not going to touch him with my left hand. So in order to hit him again, I'm going to have to make a fist, and I'm going to have to punch him on that side of his face. So, okay, you're done.
Okay, what are we doing next?
You can just go over there. You can get out of the shot now.
Okay, but...
Yeah, it's good.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
If you need me, I'll...
Okay, you'll be right there.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Got it. So
what?
Okay, it's good. Okay. All right, are you done?
I probably...
Did you have your fun?
Listen, the jury's still out.
Okay.
I might be back.
Well, okay. So anyway, so basically, if someone is above you and they slap you, that is signifying that you are beneath them. And when you turn the other cheek toward them, if they were to hit you again, at that point, they would have to punch you or hit you as an equal. So let's say you have, again, we talked about this hierarchical society. So say, for instance, you have a slave and a slave owner, okay, and they're in the courtyard, and this slave owner has, you know, a lot of slaves and they're working, and if the owner comes out, and if the slave owner, you know, gets mad and, you know, decides he wants to mistreat this person, and he goes up to them and he, you know, slaps them with his right hand on their right cheek. If the slave owner then, or the slave then turns the other cheek, their left cheek, towards the slave owner, in order for the slave owner to hit him again, what does he have to do? He now has to punch him and hit that slave as an equal. So the slave owner is now faced with a choice where if he does nothing, and if he doesn't hit the slave again, then this powerless slave has now one-upped the owner, and the owner looks powerless, and the social hierarchy would be threatened. So it's this like subversive way of causing the oppressor to have to come face to face with the ways in which this system of hierarchy and oppression was at play. Okay? So now let's take a look at the next part. So now we have where Jesus says, if anyone wants to sue you for your coat, hand over your cloak as well. So a little bit of backstory here that we have to remember is the Jewish people were being occupied and oppressed by the Romans. And they were also experiencing what's called triple taxation. So you have the Jewish people. So first they were taxed by their own sort of Herodian government. They were also being taxed by the Romans. So the Romans invaded Israel and now were also heavily taxing the Jewish citizens. And then also they had to pay a temple tax, which the temple tax was supposed to be used to give to the poor, but the Sadducees, which was like a group of like religious elite who were in charge of the temple, instead the Sadducees were getting rich off of those taxes and profiting off of those taxes. So the Jewish people are being taxed 3 times. There are some historians that estimate they could have possibly been being taxed up to 90% of their income due to the oppression and corruption that they were experiencing. So you can imagine that, you know, you have a few people at the top who are making most of the money, and then you have all these other people on the bottom who the money is being made off of the backs of these people who are going further and further into poverty and into debt. And because of this, when the Jewish people would get really far into debt, it was common for landowners and debt collectors to turn around and sue them. So it's like, you know, they're being taxed so much they can't even afford to pay for their land, so they go into debt, and when they can't pay their debts, then they have these landowners coming after them, suing them for them to be able to pay up on their debt. And if it got really bad, they would start going after their personal property, even to the point of suing them for the very clothing they have on their back, which, can you imagine how utterly dehumanizing that would be, to where you're being sued for even the clothes that you have on your back? It would be so shaming, and it would be so incredibly humiliating. And so, you know, and the reason you're being sued in the first place was because you had been oppressed by an incredibly corrupt system. Now, in the first century, people typically wore an inner garment, their coat, and then an outer garment, their cloak. So when you were being sued, it would be for your coat or for your outer garment. And if someone was suing you for your outer garment, this would take place in a trial in front of city and government leaders. It would be in a public place. And in the first century, what we have to also remember is, so they had those 2 garments, but they weren't wearing anything underneath the inner garment, okay? They were just completely naked under the inner garment. And we also have to understand that in Jewish culture, nudity was considered a big no-no. But what's interesting is if someone was naked and they were seen by other people, the shame was actually on the person viewing their nakedness, not so much on the person who was naked. And we see examples of this, like in the story of Noah, when his sons looked upon him when he was naked in his tent. The shame and the curse was brought upon them, not on Noah. So what Jesus is saying here is he's saying, if you find yourself being sued, which is obviously the result of oppression and corruption, and your oppressor is taking your coat, suing you for your coat or your outer garment, give them your cloak or your inner garment as well.
Guess who's back?
So take this off.
No, God.
Oh no!
Dan.
I thought you wanted me to. Well, I was to illustrate.
No, we're not.
Oh, okay.
We're not.
Sorry.
We're not illustrating
Sorry.
that.
Sorry,
Dear
my bad.
Lord. That was not planned. This, okay. Yeah. All right, cool. Anyways, so no, we're not going to illustrate this. But basically, Jesus is saying that, and now I've like totally lost my place, so I have to find it again. So if someone is suing you for your outer garment or your coat, give them your cloak or your inner garment as well. So Jesus is basically telling them, strip naked and give them, you're standing there naked in front of them. Well, in that moment, can you imagine, the person suing them knows that if they view this person naked, the shame is going to be on them. So when the person who's being sued starts to remove their inner garment, the person suing them is probably going to be like, no, leave that on. Don't take that off. Don't take it off. And so, the oppressor doesn't want to have shame brought upon them. And so in doing so, the oppressor once again is forced to come face to face with this system of hierarchy and oppression. And now let's look at the last thing, okay? That Jesus says. He says, if someone forces you to go 1 mile, go 2 miles. So again, in first century Israel, they were occupied by Rome, okay? And by law, a Roman officer at any given point, when the officer was going to be walking from one place to another, could grab any citizen off the road and require that citizen to carry his pack. So they would carry these large packs that had supplies and things in it, and they could require that citizen to carry their pack. And we also have to realize that this task of carrying luggage and bags and things like that, that was the kind of thing that was designated for donkeys. So forcing someone to carry their pack for them was dehumanizing and just one more way that they used their power to oppress. However, Roman military law stated that an officer could only require a civilian to carry his pack for 1 mile. So if they were caught making someone carry it for more than that, that Roman soldier, that Roman officer would have been subject to discipline. If one of his superiors saw him, or if someone else saw and then reported him, he would then be subject to discipline. So, say he grabs this citizen off the road and makes him carry his pack in a very dehumanizing manner, and they get to that mile marker, and then that citizen just keeps going. At that point, what does the Roman officer have to do? Most likely he's going to say, no, stop, come back, you can't keep going. And so this is, why Jesus is saying, if someone tells you to walk 1 mile, you walk 2. So once again, this is this subversive act by the person who is being mistreated, brings the oppressor to a tough spot where he has a decision to make. Do I allow the one who is beneath me to have the upper hand, or do I risk facing negative consequences? And here's the thing. So the first time that I heard all of this, I literally was so blown away. I think I even called Dan and I was like, oh my gosh, this is the most incredible thing I've ever heard, because it was completely different from anything I had ever understood about that passage before. And it, felt so much more in line with the other things that I believe to be true about Jesus. And the thing is, we also have to see, how revolutionary it was for Jesus to teach in this way. And imagine how shocked the people who were listening to these teachings of Jesus must have been, when he's giving them permission to use these subversive tactics to reclaim their right to humanity and equality. And to know that in the crowd that Jesus was teaching, there most likely were Sadducees in that crowd. There were most likely Roman soldiers around who could hear the things that Jesus was teaching. And it's like, it's threatening the way that they, would hold their power over others. And, this is why so many in power wanted to kill him, because Jesus was just this total threat to their power structures that they were comfortable living in. And when we see this, we read these teachings of Jesus, we see that Jesus is giving us a different way to live. It's just this complete and total different way to live. And I'm going to have to move my computer for a second because my battery's about to die. So I apologize. But I'd rather do that than have my battery die and then not know what I'm saying next. So there we go. Okay. So we see in these teachings that Jesus is offering another way, a different way to live. And Rob Bell, in his podcast, he calls it third way living. And I just thought that was so cool. And so what exactly does he mean by third way living? Well, when we think about it, when people are faced with situations where they have been hurt or harmed or wronged in some way, most people respond in one of two ways. Often we kind of see two ways to respond. Either do nothing and take it, or to do something harmful back, to kind of get revenge, to make that person pay, right? So when someone chooses to do nothing, when you have someone who is being hurt and who is being harmed, and they choose to do nothing, mostly it's not because it's because they are afraid or they don't feel like they can, or that they don't have a strong enough of a voice to be able to, to resist. What that is rooted in is this feeling of powerlessness, right? Someone might feel like it won't do any good, or they're afraid it'll make things worse, or maybe they've been hurt so many times that they start to fall into despair and they've just resigned themselves to the fact that things will never change. And this always leads to hopelessness and despair. When we do nothing in the face of harm and oppression, it leads to hopelessness and despair. And the other option is revenge, right? It's to do something hurtful back, or sometimes even more hurtful. It doesn't feel good to be wronged, and it's like a natural survival instinct response for us to wanna fight back. And someone says something nasty about you, you turn around and say something nasty about them. Someone hurts you, so you decide you're gonna make them pay for what they did. But the problem with this response is this response just continues the cycle of violence and injustice. It continues that cycle. Getting revenge always escalates. It never actually resolves a situation. But when someone chooses this third way, as Rob Bell says, that Jesus is showing us, this better way of living, that is when the door is opened for actual change. So when someone has been wronged or oppressed and they turn the other cheek, or they hand over the cloak, or they walk the second mile, what they're doing is they are flipping the power structure on its head. They aren't doing nothing, which leads to despair, and they aren't getting revenge, which keeps the cycle of violence going, but rather they're choosing a different way, a way that is rooted in goodness, that brings everyone back to face their full humanity. And the key word here is everyone. Because at the end of the day, God wants to liberate both the oppressed and the oppressor. God wants to liberate everyone. And in each of these scenarios that Jesus is giving us in this passage, not only do we see the oppressed being able to take their power back and to refuse to keep the cycle of violence going, but also the oppressor is given the opportunity to choose another way, to be faced with both their own humanity and the humanity of the person that they are oppressing. In this third way, there is hope for the liberation of all, of all. This way of living points to the kind of world that we can create, where justice and love and equality and inclusion can burst forth and crush systems of oppression. Jesus talked a lot about the kingdom of heaven, and this is a way that we can bring the kingdom of heaven here to earth. It's an opportunity for us to bring down the systems of hierarchy in our own culture, lest we think that oppression and a hierarchical kind of society only existed in the first century. It exists now. There is a hierarchy in our culture now. It's one in which white, straight, cisgendered people are at the top, and those with marginalized identities are being told to stay in their place. This also reaches to the daily interworking of our lives as well. It's not just systemic, but it's also the ways in which we interact with one another. We get to choose this third way in the ways in which we interact with those that we are in relationship with. We don't have to be passive and do nothing when we are being hurt by others. And we can also choose to not allow the cycle of violence to continue by hurting back those who have hurt us. And the thing is, this way, it will not be easy, right? This is not easy. It's not easy for someone who's being oppressed to find ways to kind of be subversive and to go against the system. It's not easy. And it takes courage for us to set boundaries and to change the narrative in situations where we are being taken advantage of or being hurt. But what a beautiful picture of what can be in our world. What a beautiful picture of what can be in our world, where we can both stand for justice and also refuse to continue the cycle of injustice and violence, where we can choose this third way that Jesus is showing us. And he's showing us that creating this kind of world is absolutely possible. So that is, as far as notes go, that's like all I have for you this morning. But I just, I think I don't have a lot of like very specific takeaways for you as far as like, here are the 5 things that you can do this week to create this kind of world. But what I want us to do is just sit with this for a while. Sit with what these passages are telling us and the ways in which we can allow that to form and shape our worldview, and the ways in which we move in the world, and the ways in which we stand for justice and for equality, and the ways in which we decide that we are going to move forward and create this more beautiful world that Jesus is showing us that we can create. And if anybody has, any additional comments they want to throw in the chat, I would love to hear your ideas and like what you think. I am going to look to see a couple of things that Dan wrote. Barrett said, I always thought these verses were a way of fighting the system, but I understand how. Yeah, like it was kind of like Dan was just saying this last night, how it was like you would hear those verses and go, there's got to be something more to this, but like I had just never fully grasped it. Dan said, think about the civil rights movement. America woke up when they saw the freedom fighters being bitten by dogs and sprayed with fire hoses and were forced to see the oppression. Those brave men and women took power by turning their cheeks in this same way. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah. And I just think that I'm excited about this series. I'm excited about exploring more and more in depth just some different teachings of Jesus that really point us more and more to really who Jesus was too, right? Like, I think sometimes it's easy for us to have this picture of Jesus as being this like soft-spoken, like kind, which I'm not saying he wasn't kind. And obviously Jesus was loving, but like, sometimes we just don't understand how incredibly revolutionary the things Jesus was saying were at that time. And the more we dive into it, the more we go, oh yeah, that's why people hated him. That's why they killed him, because he was threatening everything. He was threatening their power. He was threatening, their status. And yeah, I think we just, the way that we continue to live like Jesus is we just continue to fight for a world that is just and gives equality for all, and that liberates both the oppressed and the oppressor. So thank you all so much for joining us today. I hope that this was helpful. If you want to hear, like, quite honestly, someone explain this even better than I ever could, you can go on to Rob Bell's podcast, and he has a series on his podcast called The Thing in the Air, and one of the episodes is called The Third Way, and it's in that podcast, and it's just super amazing and life-changing, and it's just been incredibly helpful for me. So I'm looking forward to the next couple weeks. leading up to Easter. I do have one fun kind of teaser announcement for you, and in the next couple of weeks we'll give more details, but I just want you all to know that we are currently planning a outdoor in-person gathering for Easter. So hopefully, the weather will cooperate, but that's what we're planning right now. And so, so obviously we will still have a really great online experience for those who do not yet feel comfortable gathering in person, and for those of our wonderful, amazing Icon family who are out of town, who don't live in our area. So don't worry, it will be just as an incredible Easter experience for you as it is for those of us in person. But I just wanted to give you a little heads up and a little teaser out there of what's to come. And I hope you all have a fantastic and incredible week. And I look forward to seeing you back here next Sunday.